Welcome to today's deep dive. I am incredibly excited to get into the stack of source material we have in front of us today.
Yeah, me too. We are looking at a really highly curated set of practice questions and answers.
Right, specifically designed for the NSE 5 SSE AD 7.6 exam.
Exactly.
And if you were listening to this, you're likely an IT professional gearing up for that certification. Or, maybe you're just tasked with architecting a modern network.
Which is no small feat.
No, not at all. You really need to understand the nuts and bolts of how these systems actually interact. So our mission today is straightforward. We focus heavily on the exam questions and answers, but we aren't going to sit here and just read you a list of multiple choice letters to memorize.
Right, because that is not how you pass an advanced exam.
Definitely not.
And it certainly isn't how you build a resilient network in the real world. Rote memorization will absolutely fail you the moment you step into a live production environment.
Yeah, the real world doesn't give you multiple choice options.
Exactly. The exam material we're analyzing today, it tests your understanding of the underlying mechanics. We need to look at how decentralized SD-WAN, SaaS deployments, and network analytics actually function under pressure.
Because when you understand the why behind the configurations, the scenarios presented in the exam stop looking like tricky questions.
They just start looking like logical architectural decisions.
That is the exact mindset we want to cultivate today. To give you a quick roadmap of what we are covering, the source material spans the 5 major pillars of the exam.
It's a lot of ground.
It really is. We are going to navigate through decentralized SD-WAN, rules and routing, SaaS deployment, secure internet access, which you'll often see abbreviated as SIA, along with secure SaaS access, and finally, analytics.
It's a massive amount to cover, but we've distilled it down.
Yeah, we are going to act as your shortcut to mastering these complex concepts. We'll tie them to real-world applications so they actually stick in your mind for the exam. So, okay, let's unpack this. And the most logical place to start is right at the beginning of the user journey.
Identity and access.
Right.
It all starts there. I mean, you cannot apply a routing rule or a security policy if you don't have absolute certainty about who is attempting to access the network.
Which brings us to question 1 in our practice stack. This is a critical scenario you need to master.
Oh, definitely.
The source material presents a situation where Fortis needs to verify remote users by redirecting them to an external third-party identity provider. Now, the correct answer to question 1 is C, Security Assertion Markup Language, or SAML.
Right.
But let's look at why. Why would a network architect choose this over, say, just a local password database?
It really comes down to scale and security. Just imagine an enterprise with 10,000 remote employees.
That's a lot of passwords to manage.
It's a nightmare. If FortiSASE had to maintain its own isolated database of usernames and passwords, you're creating a massive administrative bottleneck.
And a huge target for attackers.
Exactly, a highly lucrative target.
Yeah.
So instead, the industry relies on federated authentication. SAML is the underlying protocol that makes that federation possible. In this setup, FortiSASE acts as the service provider, and it completely delegates the burden of authentication to an external identity provider, or IDP.
Wait, but doesn't that just move the vulnerability?
How do you mean?
Well, if FortiSASE relies entirely on an external identity provider like Microsoft, Entra ID, or Okta, aren't we just outsourcing our security perimeter? What actually happens under the hood when a user tries to log in?
That's a fair concern, but the mechanism is incredibly robust. When you attempt to connect, FortiSASE essentially pauses the request and redirects your browser to the IDP.
Okay, so you log in there.
Right. You input your credentials there, maybe satisfying a multi-factor authentication prompt. Once the IDP is satisfied, it generates a signed assertion and sends it back to FortiSASE.
And what exactly is that assertion?
It's a mathematically unforgeable token. It confirms your identity and your access rights without FortiSASE ever seeing, handling, or storing your raw password. It is the absolute backbone of secure single sign-on.
Got it. So the user authenticates once, the assertion is passed, and they get access to their resources. That covers our managed users.
Yes.
But question 7 in the exam material throws a bit of a curveball.
It does.
The scenario asks, what happens when a user needs internet access through the FortiSASE environment, but they absolutely cannot install any software on their computer?
A very common real-world problem.
Right. And the correct answer for question 7 is A, agentless mode. Let's visualize this for a second. We're talking about unmanaged devices here.
Yeah, think of a third-party contractor bringing in their own personal laptop.
Or an employee needing emergency access from a public kiosk in a hotel lobby.
Exactly. In those situations, pushing a heavy endpoint security agent onto the operating system is either administratively impossible or it's explicitly blocked by the device's local permissions.
But if we don't have an agent installed on the endpoint, how do we enforce anything? Doesn't the security perimeter just vanish?
What's fascinating here is that the perimeter doesn't vanish. It simply shifts to the browser.
Oh,
Agentless mode allows users to access internet resources through FortiSASE by utilizing browser-based mechanisms and secure web portals for authentication and traffic redirection.
so they just go to a website.
Right. The user navigates to a specific portal, authenticates likely using that SAML process we just discussed, and their traffic is proxied through the SASE platform. They receive the full benefit of cloud-delivered security inspection, but the barrier of installing a local client is completely removed.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So we have successfully authenticated our users, whether they're using a dedicated agent or browsing through an agentless web portal. Now we move into the second major theme of our material, which is building the fortress.
Securing and steering the traffic.
Exactly. Once these users are on the network, how do we protect their traffic, steer it to the right place, or intentionally let it bypass our filters? Let's look at question 3.
Okay.
This question focuses on secure internet access, or SIA. It asks which 3 features protect remote users. And the correct answer is B, C, and D. Antivirus scanning, content filtering, and intrusion prevention.
It's really helpful to view the secure internet access framework as a layered defense strategy.
Right.
When a remote user sends traffic out to the public internet, the SIA framework intercepts it within the cloud. This ensures it complies with corporate security policies before it ever reaches its destination.
You know, I find it easiest to translate these 3 features into a physical security analogy.
I like those. Let's hear it.
Think of SIA as the security team at an exclusive, high-stakes VIP club.
Okay.
Your antivirus scanning is the bouncer right at the front door. They are checking everyone's pockets against a known list of threats to ensure no one is smuggling in a malicious payload, like a known virus signature.
That fits perfectly.
Then you have content filtering. That's the system of velvet ropes and maps that restrict where guests can actually go inside. It physically blocks access to restricted, inappropriate, or dangerous neighborhoods on the web.
And that leaves intrusion prevention, which would be the undercover security guards actively monitoring the crowd. They aren't just looking at static lists. They're analyzing behavior, looking for anomalies, and watching for network-based attacks in real time.
Right.
What is critical for the exam is understanding that these 3 services, AV, content filtering, and intrusion prevention, they do not operate in isolated silos. They function synergistically within the CZ cloud. It's a unified, cloud-delivered security inspection that follows the user anywhere in the world.
That perfectly covers traffic going out to the public internet, but question 6 introduces a different scenario.
Secure private access.
Yes, SPA. What if the user needs to reach internal, highly sensitive enterprise resources that are hosted on-premise? Question 6 asks what the 2 required components are for this, and the correct answer is B and D, a FortiGate acting as a hub and a functional SASE private tunnel.
So you are essentially anchoring the cloud directly to the physical data center. You're building a secure bridge between the decentralized user and the centralized private environment. Secure private access is designed to safely extend the enterprise network. To achieve that, you need a termination point on the enterprise side, which is your FortiGate device configured as an SD-WAN hub.
And the SASE private tunnel is the encrypted highway connecting the remote user to that hub.
Exactly. The private tunnel is an IPsec encapsulated corridor established between the FortiGate hub and the FortiSASE cloud infrastructure.
Making it totally invisible to the outside.
Right. When a remote user requests an internal application, that data is completely shielded from the public internet. It travels through the SANI cloud, down the private tunnel, and hits the FortiGate hub. The hub then applies its own layer of access controls before letting the user touch the internal server.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because question 5 in the exam material presents a scenario where we intentionally punch a hole in that setup.
The steering bypass.
Yes. Question 5 asks which 2 destinations allow a steering bypass to ensure specific traffic does not enter the SASE tunnel. The correct answer is A and C, fully qualified domain name, or FQDN, and IP subnet.
Right.
But hold on, we just spent all this time building elaborate encrypted tunnels with bouncers and velvet ropes. Why on earth would an administrator intentionally configure a bypass? Isn't that just a massive security loophole?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know. but it is a vital necessity for network performance and user experience.
How so?
Well, you don't want to inspect every single packet if you already have absolute trust in the destination.
Mm.
Or if routing it through a cloud security tunnel would literally break the application. Think about a high-definition video conferencing service like Microsoft Teams or Zoom.
Oh, right. If you backhaul real-time video through a cloud inspection engine, you're going to introduce jitter and latency. The call quality would be terrible.
Precisely. Or consider local traffic. If a remote worker wants to send a document to a wireless printer sitting 3 feet away on their home network, sending that print job up to the SASE cloud and back down makes absolutely no sense.
Right, it's incredibly inefficient.
By configuring a steering bypass using an IP subnet for the local network, or an FQDN for trusted cloud applications, the firewall dynamically resolves those destinations and allows the traffic to flow directly. It avoids the SASE inspection framework entirely, preserving massive amounts of bandwidth and eliminating unnecessary latency.
That focus on latency and performance is the perfect transition into our third theme, the traffic cops.
Yes.
We need to look at how SD-WAN makes intelligent, split-second routing decisions. Question 2 is a core exam scenario involving an SD-WAN rule using the best quality strategy.
A very important strategy to understand.
The question asks how this strategy selects an optimal link. And the correct answer is A and D, packet loss and latency.
The best quality strategy is arguably the most dynamic feature within the SD-WAN toolkit. It shifts routing from a static, predefined path to a living, breathing evaluation of real-time network health.
It's very much like using a smart GPS application when you are driving.
That's a great way to think about it.
If you just look at a paper map, you will pick the route with the shortest physical distance. But a smart GPS is constantly pinging the network to check for real-time conditions. In network routing, packet loss is the equivalent of a road filled with potholes, where your car sustains damage data is literally being dropped and has to be retransmitted.
And latency is the traffic jam.
Right. The data gets there, but the delay degrades the experience.
The analogy holds up really well because it highlights the need for constant monitoring. The SD-WAN system doesn't just guess. It uses performance SLA probes.
Tell us more about those.
These are lightweight, continuous tests like HTTP requests or ping sweeps sent across all available network links. By measuring packet loss and latency in real time, the system can instantly shift a user session to whichever link is currently providing the cleanest, fastest route.
But the exam digs even deeper into how those probes actually function. Question 10 focuses on the relationship between performance SLAs and SD-WAN rules.
Yes.
The correct answer here is A and D. Rules use SLA targets to verify link health, and metrics are only measured if the SLA target is active.
This raises an important question about the underlying mechanics. SD-WAN is incredibly intelligent, but it is not psychic.
Right, it needs parameters.
Exactly. It requires explicit configuration. Our performance SLA target defines the exact threshold of pain your network can tolerate. For instance, you might configure a target stating that anything over 50 milliseconds of latency is unacceptable for voice traffic.
And the second part of that configuration metrics are only measured if the SLA target is active. So, if an administrator builds an elaborate SD-WAN rule but forgets to activate the SLA target probes, the rule is essentially flying blind.
That is the exact trap many architects fall into on the exam and in real life. If the active probes are not turned on, the continuous measurement of packet loss and latency simply does not occur.
Wow.
The SD-WAN rule has no data to evaluate, which means it cannot dynamically shift traffic. The intelligence of the routing is entirely dependent on the active collection of those metrics.
Okay, so let's assume the probes are active. Question 8 then moves to load balancing.
Right.
It asks, what 2 criteria let multiple links participate in traffic distribution? The correct answer is B and D. Links must meet the SLA targets, and links must be part of the same zone. What happens the millisecond? A link violates that SLA target. Let's say latency suddenly spikes to 200 milliseconds.
The system's reaction is instantaneous. The moment a link fails to meet the configured SLA threshold, it is flagged as degraded in the routing table.
Just immediately excluded.
Immediately. Once a link is in a degraded state, it is excluded from the load balancing pool. The SD-WAN rule will not distribute any new sessions to that link. It's a self-healing mechanism designed to protect the user experience from sudden degradation on an ISP line.
And regarding the zones?
You can only load balance across links that serve a similar logical purpose, which is why they must be grouped into the same SD-WAN zone.
Makes sense. Now, we've covered all these highly specific rules, SLA targets, and active probes, but network environments are chaotic, and you can't anticipate every single type of traffic.
You really can't.
Which brings us to question 4, the ultimate edge case scenario. What happens if network traffic fails to match any user-defined SD-WAN rule?
The fallback.
Exactly. The correct answer is B. The traffic follows the implicit rule. So what does this all mean for the baseline functionality of the network?
It means the architecture includes an ultimate safety net. The implicit rule is the foundational layer of any FortiGate SD-WAN setup. Firewall policies process traffic sequentially from the top down.
Right, looking for a match.
If a packet filters through every single custom rule you painstakingly built and finds no match, the system does not panic. It does not drop the traffic by default.
So, expanding on our GPS analogy from earlier, if the navigation system completely loses its connection to the satellites and doesn't know any specific detours for the road ahead, the implicit rule is the car deciding to just keep moving forward on the main highway rather than slamming on the brakes in the middle of traffic.
That captures the intent perfectly. The implicit rule ensures that unmatched traffic is still forwarded. It applies a default load balancing behavior across the available healthy SD-WAN members. Its primary purpose is to maintain connectivity and prevent traffic from being black-holed just because an administrator didn't account for a specific, obscure application signature.
It's a critical failsafe. Now consider the sheer complexity of everything we have discussed. We have remote users authenticating via third-party SAML. We have unmanaged devices accessing portals through agentless mode. We have branch offices utilizing dynamic SD-WAN rules based on real-time latency probes and implicit rules catching the overflow.
It's a lot of moving parts.
How on earth does an IT department maintain visibility over all of this? This brings us to our final theme, the panopticon. Question main asks, if you need a unified report for both branch office SD-WAN logs and FortiSASE remote user logs, where does it go?
The final piece of the puzzle.
Right. And the correct answer is D, to an external FortiAnalyzer.
Visibility is the single most valuable asset in a decentralized network. If you leave your log data localized, meaning your branch office firewalls hold their own logs and the SASE cloud holds its own data, you are effectively blind.
Because you can't connect the dots.
You cannot correlate events at all. You wouldn't know if a latency spike at a branch office was connected to a surge of unmanaged devices authenticating through the SASE portal.
You need a central aggregator, a single source of truth.
Yes. FortiAnalyzer functions as that centralized hub. By streaming logs from the physical FortiGate SD-WAN deployments and the cloud-based FortiSASE environment into an external FortiAnalyzer, administrators gain a comprehensive God's-eye view.
Bringing it all together.
Exactly. They can generate unified reports that blend network performance metrics, security policy violations, and user authentication events across the entire global infrastructure into one single pane of glass.
I want to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. We hope unpacking these scenarios and answers gives you the edge you need for the exam and, more importantly, a deeper understanding of the networks you are building.